An executive laughed at Clint's script. 30 days later, he asked for a job. A studio executive named Dennis Markham sat in his corner office at Universal Pictures, openly laughing at the script Clint Eastwood had brought him. "This is the project you want to make next?" Dennis asked, barely containing his amusement. "A jazz musician? A love story? Where's the action? Where's the violence? Nobody wants to see Clint Eastwood play a sensitive artist." He tossed the script across his desk like garbage. "Take this somewhere else. I'm not wasting the studio's money on career suicide." Clint Eastwood picked up the script, thanked Dennis for his time, and walked out without argument. 30 days later, Dennis Markham was cleaning out his office after being fired from Universal. He made one phone call before leaving the lot to Clint Eastwood's production company, asking if there might be any positions available. The response he received would teach him more about character than any business school ever could. The Universal Pictures executive building projected power. Glass and steel, carefully positioned to catch the California sun, designed to intimidate visitors into understanding their place in the Hollywood hierarchy. Dennis Markham's corner office occupied the 6th floor, with a view that reinforced his position in that hierarchy. Dennis had been in his role for 3 years. He had greenlit successful projects. He had rejected unsuccessful ones. He believed he understood the film business, what worked, what didn't, what audiences wanted to see. What he received instead was a script about a jazz musician who falls in love with a troubled woman. Dennis read the first 10 pages during the meeting. Then he started laughing. "This is what you want to make next?" Clint sat across the desk, his expression neutral. "I believe in the material. A jazz musician? A love story? Clint, your audience expects certain things from you. They expect tough guys. They expect action. They expect the squint and the one-liners. My audience expects quality. I've always tried to deliver that, regardless of genre. Quality doesn't matter if nobody shows up, and nobody's going to show up for this." Dennis gestured at the script dismissively. "Where's the violence? Where's the bad guys? Where's the part where you shoot someone? This isn't that kind of film." "Then it's not a film Universal wants to make." Dennis leaned back in his chair. "Let me be direct with you, Clint. I've been in this business long enough to know what works and what doesn't. This," he picked up the script and let it fall back to the desk, "doesn't work. You've read 10 pages. I've read enough. The concept is wrong. The genre is wrong. The expectations are wrong. You're one of the biggest action stars in the world, and you want to play a jazz musician who falls in love. That's not evolution. That's confusion. I see it differently. You're welcome to see it however you want, but you won't be seeing it at Universal. We're not going to finance your career suicide." Clint reached for the script. "Then I'll take it somewhere else." "Good luck. You'll need it." Clint Eastwood left the Universal lot without argument. He didn't defend the project. He didn't try to convince Dennis that he was wrong. He simply accepted the rejection and moved on. Dennis watched him go with satisfaction. He had done his job. He had protected the studio from a project that would obviously fail. He had demonstrated the kind of judgment that justified his position and his salary. He told his colleagues about the meeting later that day. "You won't believe what Clint Eastwood tried to pitch me. A jazz movie. Him playing a sensitive musician in love. I told him to take it somewhere else." His colleagues laughed with him. "What is he thinking? Maybe he's having a midlife crisis. Someone should tell him to stick to what works." Dennis felt confident in his assessment. That confidence would not survive the next 30 days. Clint Eastwood took the script to Warner Brothers. The studio had worked with him before and trusted his judgment. When he explained the project, they listened without interrupting. When he finished, they asked questions that showed genuine engagement rather than dismissive skepticism. "You're confident in this material?" "Completely. The budget you're proposing is modest. I've always been efficient. This won't be different." "What's your timeline?" "Shooting can begin in 8 weeks. We'll be finished ahead of schedule." Warner Brothers approved the project. Production began while Dennis Markham was still telling colleagues about how he had saved Universal from Clint Eastwood's career suicide. The film shot quickly and professionally. Clint Eastwood ran his set the way he always did, efficiently, decisively, without the waste that characterized many Hollywood productions. The cast performed beautifully. The material proved its worth in every scene. Word began spreading through the industry. "Have you heard about the Clint Eastwood project at Warner Brothers? The jazz movie? I heard Universal passed on it. The dailies are supposed to be remarkable." "Define remarkable." "People who've seen them are saying it might be his best work. This information reached Dennis Markham through various channels. He dismissed it. Dailies always look good. The question is whether audiences will pay to see it, and they won't. Not for this. While Clint Eastwood's production proceeded smoothly, Dennis Markham's position at Universal began to deteriorate. It started with small things. Projects he had championed underperformed. Relationships with talent he had cultivated showed strain. The confidence that had characterized his tenure started to look like arrogance. The studio head called him in for a conversation. "Dennis, we need to talk about your recent track record. Every executive has ups and downs. Your downs are becoming more frequent. The projects you're backing aren't performing. The talent you're supposed to be cultivating is going to other studios. I've had some misses. Everyone has misses. Some of your misses could have been wins. Projects you passed on are succeeding elsewhere." Dennis felt the first chill of professional uncertainty. "Which projects? We'll discuss specifics another time. For now, I need you to understand that your position isn't as secure as you might believe." The Clint Eastwood film screened for industry insiders 3 weeks after Dennis Markham's warning from studio leadership. The reaction was extraordinary. Critics who attended described it as revelatory, deeply moving, evidence that Clint Eastwood is far more versatile than his action persona suggests. Word spread quickly through Hollywood. The film that Dennis Markham had laughed at, the career suicide he had rejected, was being discussed as a potential awards contender. Dennis heard the buzz. He dismissed it initially. Awards talk doesn't equal box office. Let's see what happens when actual audiences have to pay for tickets. But something in his dismissal felt hollow now. The certainty that had characterized his rejection was eroding. The box office results contradicted everything Dennis Markham had predicted. The film opened modestly but held word-of-mouth spread. Audiences who came expecting action stayed for something better, a story that moved them, performances that resonated, filmmaking that demonstrated range and depth. Final domestic gross exceeded projections by a significant margin. International numbers followed the same pattern. The project that Dennis had called career suicide became one of Clint Eastwood's most profitable films relative to budget. And Dennis Markham's position at Universal continued to weaken. The call came on a Tuesday morning. "Dennis, we need you to come to the conference room." He knew what it meant before he walked through the door. 3 people sat at the table: the studio head, the head of HR, and a lawyer whose presence confirmed the purpose of the meeting. "Dennis, we've decided to make a change in your position. You're firing me. We're restructuring. Your role is being eliminated." "That's the same thing. Your severance package is generous. We appreciate your years of service." Dennis sat in silence for a moment. "Is this about the Clint Eastwood project? This is about overall performance. The Eastwood situation is one example among many. I made a judgment call. Executives make judgment calls. Executives are judged by the quality of their calls. Yours have been declining." Dennis Markham spent the afternoon cleaning out his office. The process was humiliating, boxing up personal items while colleagues avoided eye contact, removing evidence of 3 years of work while security waited to escort him off the lot. He thought about the projects he had championed that had failed. He thought about the projects he had rejected that had succeeded. He thought about the meeting with Clint Eastwood, the laughter, the dismissal, the certainty that he had demonstrated superior judgment. That certainty had cost him everything. As he packed the last box, he found himself thinking about something his father had once told him. The moment you think you're smarter than everyone else is the moment you stop learning, and the moment you stop learning is the moment you start failing. He had stopped learning. He had started failing. And now he was leaving a studio lot with his career in ruins. Dennis sat in his car in the parking structure, unable to drive away. Where would he go? What would he do? His entire identity had been wrapped up in his position, his office, his place in the Hollywood hierarchy. Without those things, he wasn't sure who he was. He needed a job. He needed someone willing to take a chance on him despite his recent failures. He needed help. And then, sitting in that parking structure, he had an idea that he would have considered unthinkable a month earlier. He picked up his phone. He dialed a number. "Malpaso Productions. How may I help you?" "My name is Dennis Markham. I'd like to speak with someone about employment opportunities." The receptionist's tone was professional, but cautious. "May I ask what type of position you're inquiring about?" "Anything. I have experience in development, production, talent relations. I'm open to any role." "I see. And may I ask how you heard about our company?" Dennis hesitated. I met Mr. Eastwood about a month ago. I was an executive at Universal. I'm no longer in that position. There was a pause on the other end. Please hold. Dennis waited, his heart pounding. He knew how this must look. The executive who had laughed at Clint Eastwood's project, now calling to ask for work after being fired. The irony was overwhelming. The humiliation was complete, but he had no other options. Mr. Markham, I'm transferring you to Mr. Eastwood's assistant. Please hold. Dennis waited again. Another voice came on the line. Professional, efficient. Mr. Markham, this is Robert, Mr. Eastwood's assistant. I understand you're inquiring about employment. That's right. May I ask what prompted this inquiry? Dennis took a deep breath. I left Universal recently. I'm looking for new opportunities. I have experience in development and production. I hoped there might be something available. I see. And you're aware of Mr. Eastwood's interaction with Universal regarding his recent project? I'm aware. I was the executive who... There was silence on the other end. I see. Please hold. Dennis waited for what felt like hours. His mind raced through scenarios, most of them ending with polite rejection, some ending with less polite responses to his audacity. He had laughed at Clint Eastwood's script. He had called the project career suicide. He had dismissed one of the most experienced filmmakers in Hollywood with the arrogance of someone who believed his position made him wise. Now he was asking that same filmmaker for help. The hold music continued. Dennis considered hanging up, pretending the call had never happened, preserving whatever dignity remained. But dignity wouldn't pay his mortgage. Dignity wouldn't rebuild his career. He stayed on the line. Dennis, this is Clint Eastwood. Dennis nearly dropped the phone. Mr. Eastwood, I didn't expect. Robert told me you were on the line. He said you're looking for work. That's right. I understand if you're not interested. Given our last conversation, I wouldn't blame you. Our last conversation was business. You made a judgment. It turned out to be wrong. That happens. It cost me my job. Sounds like there were other factors involved. There were. But that conversation didn't help. Probably not. So what are you looking for? Dennis forced himself to be honest. I need a job. Any job. I've been in this industry for 15 years, and suddenly I'm unemployable. The phones aren't ringing. The contacts I cultivated aren't returning calls. I'm 30 days removed from a corner office, and I can't get a meeting with anyone who matters. And you called me? You were the last person I should call. But you were also the only person I could think of who might actually listen. Why would I listen to someone who laughed at my work? Because you're not petty. Because you don't hold grudges. Because you're the kind of person who judges people by who they are, not by how they treated you. That's a lot of assumptions about someone you met once. They're based on your reputation. Everything I've heard suggests you're exactly that kind of person. There was a pause. Come to my office tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Clint Eastwood's production office was nothing like Dennis had expected. No ostentatious displays of wealth or power, no walls covered with awards and photographs, just a functional workspace that communicated efficiency and focus. Clint sat behind a simple desk. Have a seat, Dennis. Dennis sat. Thank you for seeing me. I know this is unusual is one word for it. Tell me what happened at Universal. Dennis explained the warning from studio leadership, the declining performance metrics, the projects that had failed, the talent relationships that had soured, and the conversation we had about my script. It was mentioned as an example of poor judgment, one of several examples. Do you think their assessment was accurate? Dennis considered the question carefully. Yes, I was wrong about your project. I was also wrong about other things. I let my position convince me that I understood more than I actually understood. Clint studied Dennis for a moment. Why did you laugh at the script? Because it didn't fit what I expected from you. Because it didn't fit my understanding of what audiences wanted. Because I was confident in my analysis without actually testing whether my analysis was correct. And now I understand that confidence without humility is just arrogance. And arrogance makes you stupid. That's a significant realization. It came at a significant cost. Clint nodded slowly. What do you think you could contribute if I hired you? Experience, knowledge of the industry, connections that still exist, even if they're strained, and something I didn't have before. What's that? Humility. The recognition that I don't know everything. The willingness to listen instead of assuming. Clint was quiet for a long moment. I'm not going to offer you an executive position. Dennis felt his hope deflate. I understand. I'm going to offer you something else. a development role. Entry level. You'd be reading scripts, evaluating projects, providing recommendations, but without decision-making authority. Entry level. You said you'd take any job. Is that still true? Dennis thought about the corner office he had occupied, the power he had wielded, the respect he had commanded. All of it was gone. Yes, it's still true. Then the job is yours if you want it. The pay is modest. The work is demanding. The opportunity for advancement depends entirely on your performance. I want it. Good. Start Monday. Dennis Markham began his new position at Malpaso Productions. He read scripts, he wrote coverage, he attended meetings where his opinions were solicited but not controlling. He did work that he would have considered beneath him a month earlier. He discovered something unexpected. He was learning again. Without the pressure of maintaining his position, without the need to project certainty he didn't feel, he could actually engage with material and ideas on their own terms. He read projects he would have dismissed at Universal and found merit in them. He recognized patterns in his previous thinking that had led him astray. He became, slowly, the kind of executive he should have been before, one who listened more than he spoke, who questioned his assumptions, who valued input from people at all levels. Over the following years, Dennis Markham rebuilt his career. Not to the heights he had previously occupied, he never returned to a corner office at a major studio, but to something more sustainable, more grounded, more aligned with who he actually was rather than who he had pretended to be. He became known in the industry for his judgment, not the arrogant certainty that had characterized his Universal years, but a thoughtful analysis that acknowledged uncertainty and welcomed collaboration. When young executives asked him for advice, he told them the story. I laughed at Clint Eastwood's script, told him it was career suicide. 30 days later, I was fired and calling his office to ask for a job. What happened? He hired me. Entry level, made me start over, and it was the best thing that ever happened to my career. Why? Because it taught me humility. Because it showed me that being wrong doesn't have to be the end, it can be the beginning. Because Clint Eastwood demonstrated what real character looks like. The story of Dennis Markham and Clint Eastwood became part of Hollywood lore. It was told as a cautionary tale about arrogance. It was told as an example of second chances. It was told as evidence of Clint Eastwood's character, his willingness to help someone who had dismissed him, his belief that people could learn and change, his understanding that judgment about projects didn't have to define judgment about people. Dennis told the story differently. Clint could have ignored my call. He could have enjoyed watching me fail. He could have made me grovel before offering help. Instead, he gave me an opportunity to rebuild. He judged me by my potential, not by my worst moment. Did you ever apologize for laughing at his script? I tried to once. He stopped me. He said that what matters isn't the mistakes you make, it's what you do after you make them. He said the apology was in the work, not the words. What did he mean? He meant that I should focus on becoming someone who wouldn't make that mistake again, rather than dwelling on the mistake itself. And that's what I tried to do. An executive laughed at Clint's script. 30 days later, he asked for a job. The story could have ended with rejection, with Clint Eastwood refusing to help someone who had dismissed his work. Instead, it ended with redemption, with an opportunity extended despite every reason to refuse, with a second chance that transformed a career and a life. Dennis Markham learned something from that experience that no business school could have taught him. That character matters more than position. That humility matters more than certainty. That how you treat people when you have power over them reveals who you actually are. Clint Eastwood had every reason to refuse Dennis's call. He answered it anyway. He offered help anyway. He gave a second chance to someone who hadn't given his work a fair one. That was the real lesson. Not about scripts or studios or box office results. About character. About who you choose to be when you have the power to choose anything. An executive laughed at Clint's script. 30 days later, he asked for a job. And Clint Eastwood's response taught him more about success than anything that had come before.